Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar. I'd like to welcome you live from my home office here in Berlin, Germany, for this webinar called The 4 Major Obstacles for Hoteliers in the COVID-19 Era and How to Overcome Them. My name is Philip. I'm the head of marketing here at SuitePad, and I'll be your host and moderator for today. Let me introduce you to your speaker. This is Tillmann Volk, co-founder and managing director here at SuitePad, where he is responsible for all things product and operations related. And before I hand over to Tillmann for kicking off the session and his presentation, some housekeeping items. The webinar will take about 45 minutes, 30 to 35 minutes for the actual presentation. And then we plan with 10 to 15 minutes for the Q&A session. Please feel free to post your questions at any time during the webinar and of course also during the Q&A. And to do this, just use the question chat window in your GoToWebinar control panel, and we'll try to answer as many questions as possible. Yeah, and we'll also be recording this webinar, of course, so you'll each receive a copy some days after the webinar. Okay, I think that's it from my side. I'll be back later to chair the Q&A session, and without further delay, I'll pass it over to you, Tillmann. Enjoy the webinar, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Philip. Thanks, everyone, for being here and joining the webinar session today. I am excited to be talking to you today about 4 major obstacles we see through our work with different hotels across the globe in this pandemic time and also afterwards. Before we get started, I think not all of you may know what we do here at SuitePad, so let me say 2 or 3 sentences about that real quick. We as SuitePad, we've been around for 8 years now, and what we do is digital guest engagement. We provide that to hotels across the globe, which means in roughly 60,000, a little bit more than 60,000 hotel rooms across the globe, you can find our tablets where guests can order room service, book spa treatments, get their information about the hotel, use the tablet as a remote control or as a phone. And we do the software and the hardware for these hotels. And the presentation today will not be talking only about the features here, but really about the data we gather and also the best practices we see in so many hotels that we work with. And this is a collaborative effort between the hotels and us. So with that out of the way, I hope everyone's doing well. The last few months have been challenging, I think, for all of us. And I think if you ask me how we're doing, I think this graph tells the story pretty well. This is the graph of our global SuitePad sessions per week over the past few months since January 1st. And I hope you can see my cursor, but it's obvious that after like a good start into the year, the beginning of March for us, as it did probably for many of us, brought big changes. Our usage dropped 96%. So this is a 96%, that's what that looks like, within 2 weeks, and kind of remained idle down there throughout March and April until it started picking up again now in May. That was a hard time for us, just looking at how little our product was used. We'd put so much work into rolling out. Now seeing our customers struggle with the pandemic and being in that boat with them was of course not super nice. We are hopeful for the recovery right now. You can see this kind of linear progression here, and it's all going in the right direction, so we're happy about that. However, there was one thing in particular that we found really interesting in this period here between mid-March and mid-April, and that is that in this time, for the first time, we saw a huge spike in orders per session. So this is a good metric when it comes to engagement. This is how we measure parts of our engagement. More orders were placed per session on a SuitePad device than any time ever before. And there was an 80%, almost 80% hike over the time pre-pandemic. So that got us asking, what is happening there? And for your information, an order for us, it can be anything from a room service order a spa booking, a table reservation, a green option. We'll get to what that is in a second. And it's a good metric for engagement here. So that got us really asking, what is happening if we're in the midst of all these bad news, but we see that the usage that our tablets are getting is way higher. And when we look closer, we found a bunch of interesting numbers that I'm really happy to share and excited to share with you guys today. Collaboratively with our customers, we were able to find some best practices, but we also learned a lot from our customers here. And I'd like to show you some of those best practices that they have enforced, be it with us or without us in their digital guest journey to here today. Now, looking at what we'll be talking about today, I think Philip already did a good job of outlining this. We have four major obstacles that we want to talk about. And one is minimizing the risk of spreading viruses and bacteria in hotel rooms. That'll be a rather short one right at the beginning. We want to tell you about how we can use different SuitePad features to give hotels control over their room's housekeeping schedule. And this is one where we have lots of data for you. This is one I'm looking forward to. How to best offer in-room dining offerings in a pandemic, but also afterwards, and how the guest preferences have shifted there. And finally, how to ensure that you're communicating well with your guests and sending the right signals when it comes to keeping them safe and informed. One last note before we get started, actually two. Number one, this is not a feature show of any kind for us. So what we'll be going through is various use cases. Some of these are tied to the use of our product, that's true, but I will always point out when I see a good alternative to our product, so you can learn about that too, ways of doing the same or achieving the same effects on an offline mode maybe, or a non-digital way, in an analog way. And also I'll try to show you some use cases that are not even linked to the tablets at all. The reason why this is so product centric for us is obviously our product is the best way for us to gather data together with our customers and to analyze it. That's why you'll be seeing lots of the use cases originating around the SuitePad and its features. And finally, my last remark before we get started, if you're thinking, why are we talking about this now? Why is this relevant now when legislations across the globe are slowly and tentatively reopening again? The US has been pretty leading on reopening again, being open for business. That's a good thing or not, that's a different discussion. Many European countries are way less restricted than they were a month ago. And we too believe that this trend will at least carry on for a little bit still with this reopening, and many of the pandemic restrictions will not apply soon. But the pandemic is not over, and your guests may have changed their behavior that we can see at least here on the devices, and we'd like to talk about that definitely. So it might actually shape the behavior in the long run. And also there's a good chance that you have at-risk guests who will want to practice things like social distancing even in the future, even if the imminent risk of a global pandemic leading to many, many deaths seems to be mitigated a few months down the line. So this is why we still think this is still a very much relevant topic, and we'll dive right in. Number one is a simple one. That's just minimizing the risk of spreading the virus in the hotel room itself. Basically, housekeeping, house cleaning. We're not experts in this field, so I'll limit what I say to the areas that we do understand. You might have read very controversial things about the spread of the coronavirus and how it actually transmits the COVID disease. There are different ways of transmission. People have been talking about aerosols or respiratory droplets or contaminated surfaces. Although from what we read so far in the National Institute of Health or from the CDC, it seems not clear, since it's a novel coronavirus, it's not quite clear how well or how efficiently the virus travels and can be transmitted through these different channels. I think it's always best to err on the side of caution in this, and that's also the gist that we're getting from reading up with different experts. So keeping that in mind and thinking about the cleaning of a typical hotel room, it's pretty obvious that most of the no-brainer surfaces, let's call them that, are already top of mind when it comes to cleaning and disinfecting. So we're talking sinks, trash cans, toilets, doorknobs, really any kind of flat surfaces in the hotel that are easily cleaned. Those are already cleaned. Now they'll maybe get some more attention with some disinfectant. But one thing that's been keeping us kind of busy over the last few weeks is thinking about the surfaces that you have on a desk, for instance. So the guest directory, the phone, the remote control, spa brochures, paper collateral of any sort. Those are things that are way harder to clean and almost impossible to disinfect in some cases, which is why it's no big secret that we're, of course, big fans of bringing this all into a SuitePad. Now, why is this important now if you're not already a SuitePad customer? Because even many SuitePad customers, even people who've already been working with us, have been getting in touch lately and asking how can they combine more things onto this device, because it's easily and easier to disinfect. We provide videos, training videos for this, and also can link, we'll send around a link in our webinar, in the aftermath of this webinar, with a guide of all the things that you can combine onto a tablet. Let's not talk too much about this today. I'd rather talk a little bit more about the use cases that for other features that we see here in this pandemic and how hotels have been really giving us ideas for best practices. One key point is actually giving guests control over their housekeeping schedule. This may seem really simple, and many of you may already be practicing this, but it was essential really for us, and it started, or let's say this feature really started way before the pandemic even came about. So let's take a look back. A few months ago, if we would have talked about the green option, I would have told you the green option for us is a feature that we implement on the tablet to help hotels save on room cleaning costs. So you can see the pop-up here. This is a pop-up that would show up, for instance, on a tablet every night or every stay overnight at least, and would prompt the guest to answer the question, do you want your room cleaned tomorrow, or do you want to waive that room cleaning in favor of a €5 voucher, for instance, for the bar? And the idea, of course, behind that being, hey, dear guest, you know, we're doing something good for the environment. We're saving costs at the same time for ourselves. And to help you participate in those cost savings, we'll give you a voucher at the lobby bar. Of course, this is a great feature just like that, because if you are giving out a $5 or €5 voucher at the lobby bar, but your average cover is way higher than that, then that's already great. You have basically like a double savings or even some more profit there. And this was a great feature just like that. It was one of our favorite features before we came into the pandemic. Now we see that many of our customers have changed the way they do this. And this does not have to be done via SuitePad. This can be done analog as well. For instance, here we have one example of a very simple tweak really to it. The hotel has now changed the default from my room gets cleaned every day to we're not going to come into your room at all unless you tell us so. So you can basically tap request room cleaning here, and then this little dialog shows up and it says, you know, clean it please ASAP, or clean it the next day, or no, please just you know, don't come into my room. And this is a really it's a really minor tweak technically, of course, and but it's a huge effect on the actual housekeeping savings, and also on the contact, or let's say the social distancing, because the less people I have that come into the room, the less risk I run of new infections happening in my hotel. And it's a small tweak, as I said, but it's a great thing, and it can be done no matter if you have a SuitePad or not. So you could, for instance, ask this at check-in, or for instance, have a sign that says this. If you remember those 76% increase that we had in orders per session via SuitePad, a good part of this, in fact, was the green option, or came through this green option tweak that we had. And we're happy to see that, of course. It continues to be one of our favorite features. And with the double benefit now of social distancing and cost savings, I think we really recommend this more than almost any other feature that we have. Coming into the next topic, this one is fun because now we're getting into the data that we can show that we've come up with different customers. So talking about in-room dining, or to be more precise, dining in general in a hotel, and how it's shifted over the past, 4 months. I have here an example, I hope you can see it and it's not too blurry, of category views. So this, the category view is how often is a certain topic visited on a SuitePad solution, how often do guests tap on it or click on it. And we're looking at 2 months that we're comparing, April in orange and January in blue. And this is more just exemplary one hotel, but the trend is very similar in different hotels. So we've had a number of hotels that we looked at here for this, that we've been talking to, and that have confirmed this data that we have here. This is just a very good example to have a look at. This is a city hotel, and what you can see is that room service really exploded in terms of interest. So if you see here, we have, January clocking in at what, 800 or so, maybe 900 category views per month, and now we're almost at 4,000. That is insane, but it gets even better. Breakfast is a new category that was created for this, during the pandemic, because the hotel felt they needed to educate guests about how would breakfast work. Would they be picking up their order? Would they be doing room service? Would they be coming down to dine in the dining hall, but reserve a slot for that? So that exploded as well. And you can see at the same time that other topics really dwindled. So less demand here for hotel information, entertainment, restaurant, and service. And really, I see 2 big lessons here. So number one, in-room dining is extremely important to guests. This is really surprising to us, to the extent that room service exploded in a city hotel here in Central Europe versus beforehand. And the other thing is there's a strong competition for guests' interests. So if you have a topic to promote, it's more of a side note, but if you have a topic to promote on a tablet solution, then definitely you have 1 or 2 things that you can place well, and they opted for room service and breakfast. Other things really lost interest here. So, hotel information, entertainment really went back. There are 3 different modes that I'd like to talk about briefly, for that are new really in this pandemic. Of course, one thing stays the same. There's always the option for guests to dine in the hotel, in the restaurant, in the dining hall, at the lobby bar, things like that. What has changed is that we see this increased demand in in-room dining. We see a good adoption of reserving breakfast slots. So actually sending a request via tablet to reserve your table in the morning, and even to pick up dining. So to have it prepared downstairs at the lobby bar. Someone comes down from their room and then picks it up and goes up to their room to eat. And we've seen significant increases in both hotel interest and guest interest, guest acceptance in all 3 of these areas. So although the legislation now is relaxing more and more, it seems, either people are still wary about a second wave coming. I think that's worrying many people at the moment still, or it's just that they've kind of almost gotten used to this being a type of new normal of in-room dining becoming more of a thing. And this is just anecdotal evidence, but I talked to a business traveler who switched entirely to in-room dining because he still has to travel in these pandemic times, and he's still in city hotels, but he says he'd rather only dine in room. This might be reflective of or representative of more business travelers. So it really just goes to show how much emphasis this topic should be getting. And no matter what your thoughts are on the topic of in-room dining, because I think, if I recall conversations that we had in the past working with hotels, sometimes in-room dining was treated more like a cost center because it was one, and hence was also, treated like the little sister, basically, of the bar or the restaurant. If you are now reconsidering this and want to give it more priority and actually want to invite guests and encourage guests to place room service orders and to do in-room dining, then there's one thing we definitely should be talking about, and that is surcharges for in-room dining. And this is really fascinating to us because we absolutely underestimated the effect that in-room dining surcharges would have on the number and the volume of in-room dining orders coming in. So our average room service surcharge at SuitePad is €5.87. I converted all non-euro currencies to euros for this, so it's more of a Central European thing. We do see hotels who have room service surcharges up to €10. Very rarely, especially with our Asian customers, we do see sometimes higher room service surcharges even than €10. But typically, if we're looking at like a Central European, or let's say European view, then we're roughly about €10. We had a look at a bunch of hotels, took out a small sample, and only those who dropped their room service charge during the pandemic. And what we found was really surprising to us. I told you guys already, but going from €5.50 to €0, so no room service surcharge, boosted in more than one case the room service revenue by factor of 3. And even more extreme, this was 3 hotels who had taken down their room service surcharge from €10 to €0, had on average 7 times revenue increase. That's, of course, extreme. It's very surprising to us, and that's why I'd like to offer some caveats, definitely. So for one, we had to look at a small sample size because it was not, it's not that easy to find hotels who had suspended their room service surcharge right at that time. But still, the findings were pretty consistent over all of these 10 hotels. And also looking at other hotels who had either adjusted their room service surcharge up or down, we see that at least the patterns and the direction of this repeat themselves. And the other factor that we did not account for was, for instance, the restaurant not being open or other pandemic-related factors that might come into play here. Still, we feel it's safe to say that if you are experimenting with in-room dining and you want a broad adaptation, then we would suggest to drop the room service charge, because it doesn't change too much in the adoption if you increase the room service menu prices by an amount that will offset that lost revenue through the surcharge. And of course, conversely, if in the future you still, or I'm not saying still, if in the future you do not believe in in-room dining but you still need to kind of fulfill that requirement, be it for brand standards or be it for fulfilling hotel star classification requirements, then a good high amount in the room service surcharge will be doing wonders for you, because we really can see that that can bring down the orders significantly. And you'd think that the pandemic would have an influence on the price sensitivity. So we would have guessed that even with a €10 with a €10 room service surcharge, people would still be ordering in-room dining if they were really scared. it does have a tremendous effect. And that's why this is probably one of your biggest levers that you can pull if you're looking to manipulate the revenue in your in-room dining area. Moving on to one of our the final segments here, and this one really comes down to communication. So obviously we're all in very uncertain times right now, and none of us are experts in whatever is happening, and even the experts are they're lacking some crucial information. And I think in the end it boils down to communication and taking care of your guests and giving them some good guidance onto how to behave and also what you're doing for them. What does this mean? What does it mean that communication is key? At least here in Germany and also in other countries in Central Europe where I've been since this whole thing has come about, the difference between a good and a bad hotel experience really can be how the hotel handles it. So let's say you enter a hotel and they make the impression that they have not only understood the regulations and the security measures they have to take, but they also gladly do so, and they maybe even do a little bit more, but still try to make your stay as pleasant as possible. And someone greets you with a mask, but they still greet you courteously. They leave enough space between you and themselves, and they find a good way of informing you. This is really something that can make a hotel stay still very pleasant in these times, and I'm talking from personal experience here. However, I think we've all been there. You've probably all been to a restaurant over the past few weeks, or a bar, or a hotel, or a shop, where people do not seem to care, or at least make the impression that they're completely overwhelmed with the situation. And this can happen in hotels too. So let's say you enter a hotel and the front office manager is wearing their mask as a chin guard. Obviously, you're not doing anyone a favor with it. What you're showing is either you have complete disregard of the security measures, you might not be holding or keeping your distance. It's having waiters and front office clerks walking around with these chin guards and not really with masks does not give the guests a high degree of confidence in competency, but also in the kind of safety that you'll be providing in other areas. And that's why the customers that we really admire most for the best communication, they've been the ones who've been very proactive in their communication, and we've tried to take this best practice together with them and also offer it to other hotels. So here's, for instance, something we would very often suggest for hotels. So you can see here, our recommendation is to put a big tile here onto our solution. So this is actually a screenshot of a demo hotel here, and we would recommend to customers, hey, on your SuitePad solution, on your tablets, why not use a very prominent placement here and inform the guest about the things you're doing. So for instance, this is now, once we've tapped this, and this is another screenshot. So give the guests some information about, about COVID-19 in general, but also some guides on how to wash your hands, dealing with a stressful situation, but also with how to deal with kids. This all might seem really basic, and you might think, people already know this. However, it does show that you are taking the topic seriously, similarly to your staff wearing masks when they should be. And then we also really recommend a set of FAQs here where we have templates where guests can ask questions to the hotel. And this content we provide to our customers for free. We'd also like to offer it to you for free to all participants of this webinar. So we'll be including that into our follow-up email after the webinar, because this can, of course, also be printed or sent around via email. Another thing that is first and foremost is, of course, when you talk about social distancing, is also minimizing contact, personal contact between the hotel staff and guests. It used to be that when we got started a few years back, guests were very apprehensive about the idea to, kind of minimize the contact between themselves and their guests and have a digital medium between that. Now we have hotels explicitly engaging us on this, and saying, hey guys, we'd like to take out or at least offer an alternative to personal contact at the reception. One of the great tools we have here is the chat. So you can, for instance, send out a message here via the SuitePad and say, hey, look, I might be an at-risk person, I might be traveling with an at-risk person, and we would request help with the luggage or whatever, and send that to the reception. If you don't use SuitePad yet, you can also use a WhatsApp client that works as well, and has the benefit also that people are using their own phones. We do also have a phone functionality on SuitePad, which can be used for this. I don't have a screenshot for that right now. We tend to, one of the things that we find that are hard to disinfect are actually the real phones that you find on hotel desks these days, and it's probably best if people don't touch it that much. Another thing that we've seen lots of our hotels start doing now, which we're really excited about actually, is checking out or preparing the checkout. Here, for instance, we've adapted this actually from one of our customers together with them, and you can see here this is like kind of two different ways of checking out, and the guests can choose. So they can either say, hey, I'd like to check out the regular way, I'd like to pay my bill at the reception, or I would like to pay my bill in the hotel room. And in this case, what they do really is they just bring a paper-based bill up to your room and then process the payment on your credit card that they have on file. We do have a little more digital implementations of that, where we would of course send the bill and then the guest could check out like that. Those are things, either way, they still have a little bit of a manual component, so it's not a fully automated checkout, but they take away the personal contact when it's not necessary, and might be a great help for your front office staff to not have to bring the guests into the position that they have to come to the reception more often than they absolutely have to. Here's an example that we have from Redurant Hotels. This is one of our customers. I just realized that this is in German. I'm sorry. We had this webinar in German beforehand. So what this is a contract tracing formula. Form, and the guests here can enter their guest name and how many people are at the table. This is all in the restaurant, and send this to the reception. The use case behind this being putting tablets into the restaurant so that guests can use it there. And especially if you're operating a hotel in a market where you have upper limits on the capacity that you can actually operate on. So let's say you can only have 60% of rooms sold or booked at the moment, then you have tablets or SuitePad tablets that you can use in the restaurant areas. And this is where this comes from. One of our customers here, Durant, has approved for us to show this example. We think it's a cool and novel way to use it, and also it really saves a lot of printing costs and also the hassle of taking this paper that you currently sometimes see in restaurants and passing it from hotel or restaurant table to restaurant table. This is it from my end. I hope that you guys had a little bit of a glimpse into what we do here. Really thrilled to hear your question in a second. As I said, this is largely use case based and somewhat database from the stuff that we heard from our customers, and I'm really excited to answer your questions if I can. And already thank you for your attention so far.
All right, cool. Thank you very much, Tilman. So let's jump right into your questions. The first one actually is more a comment than a question. So I'll read it out. Many housekeepers complain about skipping the room cleaning for 1 or more days. Apparently, this creates serious problems such as removing limestone from showers, which end in more time to clean and set up the room for the next guest. So what's your take on that?
That's a really good point. And I think it's an absolutely valid point. In the majority of cases, however, that we talk to our customers, they seem mostly focused on so far the cost savings and now the social distancing that we can enable through this feature. So I'd say it really comes down to weighing off the risks and the benefits. It's an interesting point. I have not been made aware of this yet by one of our customers, but it's an excellent point.
Okay, then the next one is, what are standard operating procedures for protecting staff from COVID-19?
Before I say anything here, I'd say I'm not an expert on it. That's why I'd rather forego this question. I'm sorry there, because what we try to do is, of course, minimize the personal contact that is unnecessary and doesn't really add so much value. But when it comes to keeping your staff safe, I would highly encourage you to talk to professionals there. There are companies that we can recommend. I would have to research them in a second, that and look through my mails, that we can recommend that work, for instance, with these barriers that they put up at the reception, and they might also be available in your country.
All right, next question. Is SuitePad integrated with PMS, for example, for the orders?
SuitePad is integrated with all leading PMSs globally. So we, for instance, let's take an example. One of the most common ones is Oracle, of course, and their suite of PMSs. There, for instance, we can interface, and we know then the guests or the guest tenure, and we know then when a guest is in the room or not, and we can then, for instance, send out this push message for the green option only when it's a stay over guest and not if they're staying or if this is their last night.
Okay, one more small SuitePad related question, obviously from a Russian participant. Are SuitePads available for hotels located in the Russian Federation?
So far, we do not have a customer in Russia. We'd be really excited to. I know we've been in touch with different properties in Russia so far, and we have done an analysis of our technology stack. So if we can actually scale into that region, we now can. So we would be very happy to be your provider also in Russia. And we do have Russian staff on board, so they might be able to help you even in Russian.
And now I see more like comments or questions coming in, also available in India or at the Bahamas. So maybe one more comment about that.
Yes, absolutely. So we do have customers globally, and so for instance, if it's in the Maldives, we have a good presence in Thailand. So the APAC region itself is for us a very good region, and one we'd like to expand it into even more. But we already have a good customer base there. So for the Bahamas and India, in both cases, yes.
Okay, cool. Then
Actually,
next,
let me
sorry.
follow up there real quick. The only restriction I think we should say we could grow globally. The only restriction I would have to put on that is, at the moment, we would need a longer lead time for any properties going live in China, in mainland China, PRC, because of the restrictions on the server side infrastructure that we have there. We can navigate it there. We have a plan, but it would take us roughly 6 months to actually do that.
Okay, then I'll pick another question. What might be the risk of room dining, such as leftovers, can cause the cleaning or hygiene problems?
I agree. That is an issue, but it's been there before. So far, so when I talked right in the beginning about the different modes of the coronavirus being transmitted, I'm sure you're reading the same stuff as I am. So it seems that, for instance, the contamination via food so far isn't really that common, or at least is not suspected to be common. At least that's what I'm reading. Although, of course, I'm not an expert. I just believe what I read. So it seems like that wouldn't be a big source of concern there. Obviously, as soon as you have in-room dining, the mess you have to clean up, of course, gets larger. But I think in times like these, when, if ever, has it been so attractive to offer in-room dining to guests?
Okay, next question. Are SuitePads anti-theft proof?
They are. Thank you. That's a good question. So we have a number of measures, none of which can prove, can eliminate 100% of theft, but we have very little theft as is, and that's because it's a combination of the devices run the software in a kiosk mode that is very hard or nearby impossible to break, especially for someone who's not very savvy. So they can really only use the SuitePad software with your hotel implementation running on it. Then there's also no USB port on the side that someone could connect to and try to deinstall or install anything. That makes it even harder. So they would actually have to break open the device and then solder some contacts there to be able to do that. Then we have, of course, the branding on it, the SuitePad. So it's very clear that the device is for hotel use only. And of course, as with TVs or towels or whatever, you could always charge a guest if a device gets stolen. We do have an automated reporting, so if a device leaves the network for too long and doesn't reconnect, there can be an automated trigger to send to the front office. In our experience, this happens very, very rarely because people understand that this is a hotel device and don't take it along.
Okay, next question. How can I already inform my guests even before the stay about our COVID-19 restrictions and rules in the hotel?
That's a great question because today I was talking mostly about our tablet PC product, the SuitePad itself. We do have another product called Bring Your Own Device, where you can have all that information web-based, and that is primarily geared towards pre-stay communication. So whatever information you already have on your SuitePad, then you could also share with your guests in a pre-stay email. We would even encourage you to do that. And it's basically a mobile web application that runs on all browsers that are available. If you don't want to use one of our products, there are plenty solutions out there for pre-stay emails, mostly CRMs that you can look at, and yeah, there are a few really good providers there.
Okay, next question probably is again hard for you to answer, but I ask you anyways.
Okay.
Do you think all staff requires tests for COVID-19?
Yeah, I really don't feel confident enough to answer that question. Maybe what I can answer is what I've been seeing. So I'm not saying this is a good or a bad thing. Talking to hotels, and this is with a strong bias towards Central Europe, they do not have yet in place like a standard testing procedure, at least most of them that I've talked to, for all of their employees. That might change as testing capabilities ramp up globally. So far as I'm informed, Germany has actually been one of the countries in Europe with a rather high test capacity. But I can tell you from a like an end user point of view, it's not that easy to get a test in Germany if you don't show any symptoms and you're not in a profession that would require, for instance, patient contact. So that's all I can say to this right now. I can't really give any kind of recommendation there.
All right. When I look at the time, I'd say we'll take one more question, and that is more data related. What was the maximum increase for orders per session at a hotel in your sample?
Cool. So if you guys remember, I was talking about the 76% increase over the last, in this pandemic time, and that was compared to the pre-pandemic times. The max that I've seen was 300%, and we had a bunch of hotels actually hovering around that mark somewhere. So roughly around 300%, tripling their orders per session. The interesting thing about that is that the average sum of the average totals of the orders does not significantly drop. So that actually is almost 3 times the room service revenue that they made during the pandemic.
All right, then thank you very much, Tilman, for the presentation and answering all these questions. Thanks everyone for engaging in our Q&A. And yeah, I just want to say that we have prepared a little survey that pops up when I now end the webinar for everyone. It would be great if you could just fill out the questionnaire. It takes you just 30 seconds, I would say, and it really helps us to improve our webinars. We'll send around the email with the recording very soon and all the other information. And I hope you have a great day and talk and see you soon. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.